welcome to the AI FISEC Today podcast. This is where we embark on a thrilling journey into the intersection of artificial intelligence and physical security. Today, super excited for our guest, Howard Belfor, who's going to talk to us about AI readiness and security control systems and fact versus fiction in detecting probability. Howard, how are you?
I'm good,
Beard.
Don. Yes, thank you, thank you. It's good to have a beard. It's especially when the winter's coming up. I can keep my appointment to be in that sled because we run through town for our Holly Jolly event. So it's always good.
You give people like me inspiration. I want to be Howard at the at the trade show. Still just running house.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's good to be able to be still relevant and not have this face on a milk cart. So I'm grateful.
Nice, awesome. So Howard, before we dive in, tell us what's one fun thing that you'd like the audience to know about you.
Well, most people don't know that I'm also a hike leader here in the Swananoa Valley, which is in the mountains that surround an early area that was settled by the Scots and British after the Revolutionary War and before. I live right on the edge of what was the Cherokee boundary, which is relative to what we're going to be talking about today, because that was in the 1776 era where the Wild West began. And some of the things we're going to be talking about today, or at least I will, are sort of Wild Westish in a lot of respects.
Like it. So tell us, Howard, a bit about your business and background before we go into the topic.
So I've been in the security controls industry since 1976, when there were only a couple guys making credentialing products. I was involved with early microprocessor-based technologies, all of which were used to attach detection devices, door open closers, passive infrareds, all kinds of things to tell you the state of their readiness or failure. So detectors have always been a part of my short life. In addition, I've been a member of ASIS since 1981. I've been a trainer, a speaker, an author, and love the idea of training. In fact, I've had the good pleasure of training on subjects like detectors, environmental protection issues with CEPTED, and a number of other topics. So, and as well as helping sales organizations and other companies that have innovative products and services and are hoping to get themselves into the channel.
Good deal. Good deal. Thank you for that. So that leads us to the topic. AI readiness and security control systems and fact versus fiction detection probability. Take us off. Get started.
All right. Well, the object of the science is to ensure detection and increase probability to what the phone company likes to call 5 nines, or almost 100%. So just to level set, I'm a kid of the 60s, and if you want to do some math, in 1968, I was a college freshman, and that was the year that a movie came out called 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL, the heuristically programmed algorithm called a sentient, that was meant to be a machine that could perceive, feel, have a consciousness, and sense impressions. Fast forward to where we are today, we have lots of things going on in that environment, people worrying about, is it real? Is it fake? Is it artificial intelligence? And of course, we all say, hello, Siri. Not all of us, those of us on the iOS environment. I always like to level set with a definition. It's always nice to make sure that the lexicon I use is the one that I'm not missing the mark that you'd hope to. First of all, there's a lot of folks that are a lot smarter than AI than I am. But I will tell you, my first interaction with AI was as a young man selling control systems and going to a place called in Pittsburgh, where at the Mellon Institute, they had just begun to talk about AI. And I remember being told at that time that the Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary called artificial, humanly contrived, often on a natural model, brought in being by humans, not nature. And for me, this is the real disconnect. This is the flaw. This is the catch. And as a teacher, I can tell you, we've all been taught by somebody who may have actually had the wrong information or presented a point of view that wasn't necessarily accurate. So, man-made for me is the big whoops. The intelligence part of that is the ability to learn or understand new situations, also known as reasoning, and the skilled use of that reasoning. And if we fast forward to our current availability for things to look about what people might have read or thought about things, it would be how, in fact, Wikipedia and others might talk about intelligence or the ability of a digital computer, controlled computer device to perform tasks associated with intelligent beings. Now, again, intelligent beings. So I don't know about you. I watch the news lately, and I get a real bad feeling about reality TV and social media. If that's all intelligence, I'm starting to think it's not so smart. A field that combines a field of computer science, and IBM's words in this are really important to me, robust data sets to enable problem solving, or let's say detection. I'm going to return to robust data sets in a minute. So therein for me is the detector's weak link is this thing called testing. There's a lot of AI news lately, cautionary tales from the federal marketplace. Heck, even the late Stephen Hawkins is attributed to a quote that the rise of AI would transform every aspect of our lives and was a global event on par with the Industrial Revolution. It reminded us that AI might evolve quicker than we are prone to. Human beings evolve a little slower than AI. We're actually starting to hear stories about this speed is remarkable. And we forget how slow that can be. Hawkins also cautioned that complete AI would be simply do away with us. Yikes. I don't think he meant that robots would be doing our jobs. Kind of feels a little Skynet-like. I mentioned the Wild West. You know, when I think of the West, Wild West, lots of guns, no dominant caliber. Lots of gunslingers, some good shots, some not so good. Some guys that just got shot. A lot of land grabs. I'll call that market attempts, whether it's the big names that we all know who are vying for that space with AI and spending billions of dollars on algorithms and such to discover ways to use AI, and not for nefarious means, but obviously there's lots of things that can have unintended consequences. And with the guns and the gunslingers and the land grabs came the sheriffs, law and order, so that our settlers, and we can call the new guys here, or maybe our cyber cops, the government, setting some boundaries. I didn't mean this to be a primer, but just again, to set the tone. You know, when you settle into a new environment like we are now, most of us can have dreams, but sometimes a dream can become a nightmare. Some of these settlers didn't understand the hardships they were going to be coming in contact with, nor the unintended consequences. So a quick story about detectors that I hope will set a tone for you. In 1979, as a young man calling on a company in Massachusetts, the father now has passed. The son, my age, has less hair than I do. I came upon their company. I was selling them a control product that was used to monitor detectors. Their particular detection devices were smoke detectors. As I entered their warehouse in Waltham, Massachusetts, I came upon a smell of sulfur and burning smokes, the kind of smell you'd have, and I was a cigarette smoker back then, when you would light a match. And I came upon him and his dad with many, many boxes full of little white boxes full of smoke detectors. And he and his father were opening each and every box, taking the smoke detector out, putting in the 9-volt battery, firing it up, lighting a match, and checking it. And it struck me. I asked the dad, I said, so what's going on? He says, you know, this is verification and testing. And if we don't verify and test, we have some liabilities. What happens if this smoke detector doesn't work and it's determined to be faulty? And on the other table, not too far away, was a pile, not many, 5 or 6, of ones that were faulty. And that always stuck with me, that they really pioneered what I would call verification and testing to avoid a liability. So let's talk about detection for a moment. The role of a sensor or detector is to assess and communicate. They can be interior or exterior. I'm not sure what's ringing, if it's me in the background or something else. It's, to detect something in interior, exterior, internal to machines, chillers, routers, or autonomous vehicles, GPSs. There's a number of types: passive, active, ultrasound, proximity, fiber optics, temperature, water, gases. So there's a tremendous number of detectors out there, and thousands of instances where things could go awry. So if you recall early on, and when I began to talk about this, I mentioned how IBM, and the gold standard there was robust database data sets to enable problem solving, or let's say detection. So the question in my mind is, how much testing? Who's verifying it?
Mhm.
What liabilities might there exist? Do people need to rewrite their contracts to limit liabilities and mitigate lawsuits and indemnify themselves, which they may not be able to? We live in a litigious environment. We all know that. For 1,500 American dollars, I can pretty much sue anybody. We have all experienced that products that we thought were working really well. When I was back in the early 80s working for a microprocessor based company out of Los Angeles, I did everything I knew how to do to make this particular machine work. I did all kinds of stuff. Finally, I called the factory and I said, look, the gentleman's name is Monfort Chu, and Monfort is a very renowned Yoda-like martial artist, and to this day is still quite the martial artist. And I said, Monfort, I don't know, I've done everything. He says, sounds like you did everything right. Recycle power and hope for best. And that mantra, which I'm sure most of us have heard, and he didn't invent it, is really what we seem to think is the way to correct the problem. Well, what happens when a detector doesn't work? How does it get turned on and off remotely? We are seeing some products coming out now that have the ability, with switches and other things that don't sense a signal, to automatically reset the power of the device. Basically, resetting power and hoping for the best. Lost video, lost signaling, communications problem. So for me, the test and verification, the robustness of it, is really urgent. The problem that I have seen in most industries is the rush to get products out and get market share, sometimes at the expense of thorough testing,
Yeah.
sometimes at the test of just just trying to get things out quickly. And of course, for me, the other part that's fundamental is we're relying on the human to have the integrity and the honesty to do the things right and not fudge those. We've all seen those kinds of things happen. In this case, we've got a detector. Now, in this new world of IoT, the Internet of Things, or devices talking one to another, we may have a detector that works. It provides us an output, and now we're dependent upon a communications protocol, a wireless carrier, a telephonic connection, an internet connection, any number of things, and then reliant upon a software package to interpret it, manage it, and provide an action or a response. It would seem to me that to mitigate this risk of the detector that may have been put out too quickly, or the one that we're relying upon that might have failed, is that we need to, like in most environments, have some redundancy. Whether it's we think we saw something with a contact closure, we think somebody climbed a fence, we think somebody crossed over some fiber optic field, we got some ultrasonic vibration thing, and now all of a sudden we have hopefully video or some other kind of means to help us understand that. I'd like to give a shout out to a woman named Mary Lynn Garcia at Sandia Laboratories. Mary Lynn wrote a book about detection systems years ago. And for Mary Lynn Garcia, the thing about her conversation about detectors was, what is the nuisance alarm factor? How are they defeated? What is it that people can do to change the outcome of what should be a detected event? And there's a whole host of products out there that all have their quirky ways that people can kind of get around it. And it's that ability to get around the detector, if you will, that concerns me when we start to see a greater reliance on the technology and believe that we still don't have to make certain that we're verification and testing.
Yeah, it's
I have seen,
interesting. It's interesting you
yeah,
mentioned that. That I think that that's a good point because it's almost like the reliance on not the same example, but similar in my mind, like the reliance on autonomous vehicles versus not. Like, how much do I want to rely on that technology to take me to my destination safely, as opposed to me putting my hand on the wheel? And even those autonomous vehicles today still require you to put your hand on the wheel, so there's still that uncertainty that exists. And then you just come into the security world, which has some levels of similar liability. And how much of that do we just let run on autopilot, right? For
yeah,
right?
exactly.
See, yeah,
And yeah, and the autopilot, that's a great analogy. We were also starting to see the great growth in drones and the Federal Aviation Administration. There used to be a lot of FAA rules about BVOLS, beyond visual, BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight. And now they're beginning to believe that the detectors and the range and the batteries will allow them to fly these devices beyond the visual line of sight. And there's an expectation for deliveries, and there's companies today that you can sign up for if you live in an urban area that can, deliver something from a particular convenience and or national box store that's offering those kinds of services. And so far, we're kind of at the beginnings of those things. So we'll begin to see whether the market and or hopefully not too many instances of failure cause greater attention to verification. I've seen it with security systems as well. Somebody puts in a security system, they've got millions of dollars potentially spent. They write a manual, they write post orders for their guard services, for their employees. They take the book and they stick it on a shelf. And they don't test it, they don't verify it. So, test and verification. I'm not a Navy guy, but the Navy has say a command, repeat the command, say the command again. So there's that built-in redundancy. And I believe what we begin to see happening is this unintended consequence of just believing that how could that machine be wrong? I live in a pretty remote area. I live on a mountaintop in western North Carolina, and most of my home, as you might imagine, I over probably populated it with devices and sensors. But I had to learn to test them all because some of them just don't work, or maybe the water detector got wired to the fire output. So testing and verification for me is the bugaboo and the one that concerns me the most, not the technology so much. And of course, I always remember the Terminator and think of Skynet. Sarakana, we are looking for, it is always that moment where the unintended consequences of something taking over that has a different reason. And if you go back to 2001 A Space Odyssey, to my 1968 adventure, HAL was not the best machine heuristic programmed algorithm as well, with his failure to really respond properly to people. So to summarize, I'm a guarded optimist. I'm really very concerned about the robust database sets that need to be enabled for problem solving. So I don't know what those are. I am on a couple of advisory boards, and one of them is a weapons detection product. And we are required by the particular clients that we just got some grants from to do literally thousands and thousands of tests of different images so that we can get to that machine learning. So, they've set the standard, but I don't think that's currently being generated as a industry standard. So who does the verification? Who validates it? The legal issues I mentioned, liability limits, insurance carriers, I'm not sure. Most of us who have alarm systems in our homes and have signed alarm monitoring contracts, if we read them clearly, uh, it's almost as though the alarm company is not responsible for anything. But I always still advocate for having one because although I'm not too concerned about someone breaking in, even though that's a bad thing, fires and smoke damage are the real issues. So I always want those detectors to work, and those are the ones that I verify.
one of
Lastly,
the oh no, go
uh,
ahead, go ahead.
no, no, please.
I was just going to say, because I think you hit on some really interesting side. I think I might get a little feedback on the alarm on your side, maybe, but who knows? Maybe it's an imaginary one. It could be machine learning that just wants to have the conversation. uh,
Yeah,
could be jumping in. But I think, it's interesting around that detection probability topic that you bring up, because when I think about that, like, to me, AI either predicts or it explains. And when it predicts, it's never like 100% certain, but it's going to give you some level of certainty, hopefully without hallucinating too much. And what we've seen led up till recently is the use of machine learning, which provides more of a, how can we say, a higher probability with less hallucinations, but also it's a smaller data set that they're using, which would require it field time in order to be accurate, more accurate detection. And so, where I'm curious about, and actually at GSX, I saw some companies using this, openly admitting that they were using OpenAI as a basis for creating those detections. And while they don't need as much field time to run to classify things or whatever, its probability or its hallucinations could be much worse. So it's cheaper to make. They can go to market a lot faster. It does provide some value, but what is it? What is it missing? And I think one of the things
that's right.
that's on that level, right, to that extent, that's come up actually almost in every call that we've had in this podcast is like, who creates the standard? If you have the AI EU Act like happening in Europe, maybe some things are happening here in the US, right? And so, but then they fall into like the SIA board, or like, who's going to look at this when you have all these different manufacturers, let's say, that are adopting these things? What I'm more concerned about is that they are adopting Gen AI tools that are very hallucinogenic, use large language models that use the entire internet. They always use the entire internet. Um, like what I just feel like they have to. I feel like there has to be something to start. Basically, there's a stamp of approval that says this uses a whatever
Right.
UL or SIA certified thing, that it is accurate detection and it's not hallucinating or it's not biased or whatever. So what do
Yeah,
you think?
and I think you're absolutely right on. I think every single day we get some, not every day, but it seems like it, we get some kind of a notification or we hear about it in the news. I just got one today. I stayed at Caesar's Palace, and Caesar Palace just got hacked.
Yep.
MGM got hacked.
MGM. Yep.
Millions and millions and millions of people, licenses, blah, blah, blah. So you look at AI, you look at claims. We were all told years ago, don't say yes on the phone because someone thinks yes means you want to get, they record your voice. Um, I heard a story about a guy who got his image. He agreed to be part of a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very strong-looking, very Germanic-looking, kind of square-headed, militaristic-looking dude, and he looked so good that the gaming industry sucked his image up and used him in the games. He got no royalty for it. So his son is playing the game. He says, Dad, is when did that's you. So we're starting to see this unintended consequences of scrubbing.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, detectors detect, then they go upstream. Then we got software who's going to give us an action or a response. And to your point, is it hallucinating, for lack of an electronic term? Integration testing. I won't mention the client because it's under an NDA, but this particular client had a numerous, very visible client base who had a urgent requirement for things to behave. And most importantly, they were the simplest alarm inputs from the detectors. The technician on the site couldn't figure out why it was going into awry. In fact, what had happened was two wires were backwards and it was doing something weird in terms of its communications. So there were scores of these locations. So what did he do? And I've seen this happen. I've done work at Dulles International Airport systems going back to Category X airports 40 years ago. And when a runaway alarm occurred, it was rather routine for software manufacturers to put in what was called an alarm shunt mechanism, the ability to ignore it. Now, it was never intended to be a fix.
Mhm.
But for certain technical people, when they couldn't figure out why this runaway was occurring, instead of going downstream and figuring out, was it a vibration? Was it moisture? Was it noise?
Mhm.
Was it some other electronic interference? They just shunted it. Oftentimes, without the owner having an understanding that it was that occurred. So I mentioned the Wild West. The whole concept of the Wild West was born in 1776. So it's 150 years or plus adventure. Before 1800s, as I mentioned, the Appalachia, which are right outside my window, and I can point to my map of my where I live, that was the boundary. The Cherokee Indians, anything west of that, you were on your own. Um, the bottom line is we're still in the Wild West. We don't have a lot of there's danger, Will Robinson. There's still some stuff out there that could go awry, to which we have to be mindful. And the frontier, just like the Western frontier had iconic figures and stories will be told, I would just say, hold on, the adventure is beginning. I want to make sure I summarize by saying I am a guarded optimist. I do not think it's the end of the world. I do not subscribe to Mr. Hawkins' end of civilization, but I do think that a cautionary note is welcome, and that is one that I just don't really. It's above my pay grade.
It kind of goes back to one of your original points of AI readiness. It's like how much one is the industry and are we as people. I think the reality is that history has shown us anything is technology doesn't wait on anyone's feelings or anyone's inability to adapt or unwillingness to adapt, rather, right? It just goes. And I think that, um, you know, one use of generative AI, I think, is enough to wake people up if they're not paying attention. You use that example earlier about the guy that had a big stature that used in a video game. Applications that are creating images like Midjourney, for example, they're getting that from the internet, and so they're piecing puzzles together of deep fakes. It looks like deep fakes. You couldn't tell the difference if
Yep.
it's real or not, but it's a collection of a lot of people on the internet. So at what point does art and marketing turn into uh, privacy issues? And so I think it doesn't matter, though. I mean, the reality is that people have to get ready for it. And I guess to your point, it's like you would want to think that legislature would be able to run in parallel with the growth, but I don't see that happening. I mean, I think that they're working to catch up, and like you said, to your point, it's all over the place. It's wild, wild west. Just like you're describing.
Yep.
Where do you think is
And
Oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
go no, please. I think the settlers, those of us that are in the Conestoga wagons
Mhm.
with our
Yeah.
families, and we're going to have to learn when to circle up to fight the Indians, or in this case, fight the bad guys that are going to try to get our identities and those things.
Right.
So, in a lot of respects, there's analogous circumstances. The difference is the weaponry, the speed of attack,
Mhm.
the consequences, the losses are tremendous. And, there's enough science fiction movies, Minority Reports, and, doomsday ones where you have launches of weaponry. The military is now on the drone attack. I subscribe to. I just joined as a board advisory board member, the company that's in the autonomous drone and robotics business, and so I get the robotics and drone news, and some of the new news, in addition to carrying bigger payloads and stuff, is this kind of leap to having us limit boots on the ground and having machines make decisions about warfare.
Mhm.
And I just like, wow, is this reality? What just happened to the things I thought were a science fiction movie? And there it is being developed, and money's being spent and things happening. And like I said, the thing that concerns me the most is that we have artificial and intelligence. two things that almost seem diametrically opposed: artificial and intelligence. Huh. And both of them formed by that flawless human in the laboratory coat. So I feel like I'm on a Prestone antifreeze commercial where the guy comes out with the white jacket, and just because he's wearing a lab coat, that's got to be correct. So I don't know. There's enough people worried about conspiracy theories and get a vaccine, don't get a vaccine. Is it real? Is it not real? Bitcoins and fiat currencies, blah. It's all over the place. And when you take all of this uncertainty and emotional detritus, you create an environment where verification and validation almost becomes a problem by itself, because who's going to believe what happened? And then how do you take that downstream to a courthouse?
Yeah, who would have thought that the greatest creation of humankind, if this is it, could be the most transformational change ever, and would be super artificial general intelligence. Basically, the human brain, the neural networks in a deep learning capacity that can see all, and is basically becomes the great Oz, right? It has access to everything.
Right.
So, it's kind of poetic in a way. It's like, hey, the one thing that changes humanity is basically humanity at scale, right? That's like this super brain, right? But to your point, created by humans. So the one thing that led to some aspect, I'm not going to say demise, not to be negative, but the one thing that will be the most transformational of our existence that we've known, probably on record, will be the one thing that we felt to be the most innovative, right? And so it does seem a little poetic, a little bit to me. But so I know we got a few minutes left. Howard, this has been great. I think this has been an awesome topic.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it was awesome to get to spend more time with you as always. Tell the audience maybe something you're working on and where they can find you.
Well, I have a website called Belfor, Belfor Associates.com. I'm also visible on LinkedIn at Howard Belfor, Belfor. And I'm working on a article now for one of the things that we're starting to see in all marketplaces. I call it the Cheese of the Month Club. In this case, it's something that you can subscribe to. And we're going to see it with even artificial intelligence. People are going to be buying artificial intelligence as a subscription for their publishing, for their monitoring, for their interviewing, for hospitals to do research and do, triaging. So you'll almost start to see the development of applications, for lack of a better word, that are based on AI that will find their way into a ops environment as opposed to a capital expense. So I'm working on an article for one of the security magazines on just that. What's going on in the world of what used to be called SaaS and a variety of other things that are now becoming ubiquitous with, I need an ID card, I send the image up, it comes out, FedEx delivers a credential just like somebody delivers your bank card. On the back of it, you dial a number and it activates it. We're going to begin to see a majority of things that we thought were particularly unique attributes of software packages be broken off into applications and run through an AI engine. That's my...
That sounds like a second follow-up for a podcast.
I'd love it.